The sky above Terran 9 bled green, a sickly, corrosive hue that signaled more than just atmospheric decay. To the Grell, the conquerors of this galaxy's fringe systems, it was a color of triumph. To the innocent, it meant surrender. Another world taken, another people brought to their knees. And above it all, the warships hovered, monstrous machines blotting out the sun like mechanical vultures circling a dying beast. The capital city, once vibrant and adorned with crystalline spires, now howled with wind and ruin. The Grell did not merely invade, they unmade. Shrines burned, rivers turned black. Statues of peace were shattered by boots forged of metal and meat. The Grell weren't a single species, but an amalgam of horrors, eight-limbed, cybernetically enhanced abominations that walked like predators and spoke in tones like grinding glass. They executed leaders in public squares. Children were taken, not for ransom, but for research. The message carved in ash and blood was simple. No one is coming for you. And for a while that seemed true. The galaxy had watched the Grell expansion for years, a slow rot that spread from one forgotten planet to the next. The civilized species signed treaties. They spoke of neutrality. They whispered of survival. No one resisted, not openly, not anymore. In the command sanctum of the Grell flagship Dominance, Commander Vrax stood over a flickering holographic projection of Terran 9. His taloned hand tapped methodically on the interface as cities blinked out, one by one, under his advance. His voice was a low rasp, tinged with disappointment. "Another world with no teeth," he muttered. "Where is the fight? The challenge?" His second Carrack chuckled, an unsettling sound, like a knife on bone. "They all know what happens when they resist." Vrax's eyes narrowed to slits of onyx. "Not all. There is one that remains curiously silent." Carrack paused. The room went still. "Terrans?" A murmur swept through the chamber. Even among the Grell, Earth was a name spoken with caution, not out of reverence but out of respect for unpredictability. They weren't the oldest race. They weren't the most advanced. But when they fought, it was with a violence that bent the rules of sanity. Carrack sneered. "A dying species, always fighting each other. Let them rot." Vrax didn't answer. His gaze locked on a slowly rotating projection of Earth, blue-green scarred, beautiful in a way that defied logic. "Let us hope," he whispered, "that they stay asleep." But Earth was not asleep. Far from it. In an underground listening station buried beneath Europa's ice shelf, an old Terran technician leaned forward as a coded distress signal from Terran 9 danced across her console. At first, she thought it was another fragment from a dying colony, but as she decrypted the message, her breath caught. It wasn't a cry for help. It was a funeral dirge, a plea whispered into the void, with no expectation of answer. Still, Earth heard, and Earth remembered. It remembered what it meant to be forgotten, to be colonized, to be seen as primitive. The scars ran deep, in stories passed from mother to daughter, in old military records sealed beneath the crust of old cities. Earth did not rise for glory. It rose because it knew the scream of the abandoned. No votes were cast, no councils convened. In the subterranean bunkers beneath the Rockies, in rusted war rooms orbiting Saturn, in the blood-etched vaults of the Martian legions, orders were given. 3 words, just 3. Help is coming. The signal was old, encrypted in Terran code predating the Galactic Accords. The Grell intercepted it, of course. They laughed. What could the Terrans do? Their fleets were outdated, their politics fractured, their people spread thin across shattered colonies and dusty moons. But laughter turned to confusion, confusion to concern, and concern to something darker when the sky over Terran 9 cracked. Not with thunder, but with the shriek of ancient engines coming back from the grave. Earth's whisper. The sky above Terran 9 didn't explode. It fractured cleanly, sharply, like glass under pressure. And through that splinter in the heavens, they came. No elegant cruisers, no gleaming symbols of interstellar progress. What arrived were ghosts, warships covered in layers of mismatched armor, scorched by decades of combat, cobbled together from 1,000 different nations that no longer existed. They bore flags faded by radiation, crests that hadn't been seen in over a century, and hulls that still carried the scars of battles fought light years away. The Grell stared at them, confused. These were not fleets. These were relics, flying tombs. They shouldn't have made it past atmosphere, let alone warp. And yet they were fast, too fast. The first Grell interceptor turned to face the newcomers and vanished in a plume of imploding metal before it could fire a single shot. 8 seconds. The second ship tried to run. 12 seconds. Its wreckage boiled the sea beneath it. On the ground, Grell forces froze. The purge paused. They looked skyward, and that was when the Terrans landed. There were no grand speeches, no peace envoys or dramatic ultimatums. The first drop pod slammed into the heart of the Grell forward base like a thunderclap. Then another, and another. Hundreds of them, black, angular, howling with friction and fury. And when they opened, Earth walked through fire. The soldiers that emerged didn't look like diplomats. They didn't look like heroes. They looked like the end of something. Their armor was scorched from old wars, dented from close combat. No insignias, no names, just one word etched across their chest plates like a death sentence. Earth. Colonel Marin Shaw was the first to step onto the battlefield. Her helmet gleamed with plasma residue, and her boots crunched bone as she marched through the ruined streets of Karen's capital. She didn't speak. She commanded, with nods, gestures, short bursts of code through comms that were sharper than steel. Alpha Squad, right flank. Flamers clear alleyways. Bravo on me. We cut the throat at the center. She wasn't loud. She didn't need to be. Her voice was calm, efficient, like a scalpel drawn across the jugular of fate. Behind her came more. Mercenaries, veterans, outcasts. Men and women who had no place in peaceful society, but in war were poetry in motion. Some carried weapons older than they were. Others had cybernetic limbs fused from forgotten tech and battlefield improvisation. One woman carried a shotgun that looked like it had been forged from tank parts. They didn't move like an army. They moved like vengeance. The Grell responded with force, tactical units, energy turrets, flame drones. But it didn't matter. Earth's warriors weren't built for structured warfare. They weren't bred for hierarchy. They thrived in chaos. A Grell officer gave the order to engage. By the time he finished his command, he was already dead. Corporal Te Navarro, bleeding from a gash in his side pinned behind the remains of a shattered monument, gritted his teeth and whispered to his AI targeting module. 3 left, he growled. Let's dance. He rose like a nightmare, shot one in the throat, pulled a second into a headlock and bit through its jugular. When his gun jammed, he used it as a club. When that broke, he used his fists. When fists failed, he used teeth. When it was over, he was the only one still standing. He spat a glob of blood into the dirt and laughed. You bastards forgot one thing, he muttered. Humans don't quit. By nightfall, the tide had turned. Dropships touched down wherever they could. Medics poured out with stretchers, IV drips, and old Earth defibrillators. Combat engineers strung up defenses with scrap and welding torches. Drone pilots hovered overhead, watching the skies with steely eyes. And in a shattered government building, Colonel Shaw sat on a broken bench, her helmet in her lap, sweat dripping from her brow. Lieutenant Griggs lit a cigarette beside her. Think we made a big enough entrance? He said, smoke curling from his lips. Shaw gave a tired smile. Her eyes flicked up to the ruined skyline. They thought no one would come, she said. She strapped her helmet back on. Now they know better. And above them, in orbit, Commander Vrax watched in fury. The humans had not only come, they had come to remind the stars who they were. They were not advanced. They were not unified, but they were terrifying. Because unlike the Grell, who fought for order, for dominance, for control, humans fought for something the galaxy had long forgotten: each other. It's the warriors from hell. They didn't walk, they stormed. Through smoke, fire, and the stench of ash, Earth's warriors advanced like an ancient storm called back from myth. Their movements weren't clean or practiced in parade drills. They were raw, organic chaos sculpted by blood and fire. Every step they took echoed with the sound of wars survived, not studied. They didn't wear medals. They were the metals. Colonel Marin Shaw led from the front. Her armor was old, scorched, dented, ugly, but it was alive with memory. Campaigns on Mars, Titan, Europa. Every burn mark on her breastplate had a story. Every scratch on her gauntlet, a name. She moved like someone who had died 100 times, but had never found the time to stay dead. She didn't bark orders. She cut them like knives. Alpha, push right. Clear the kill box. Bravo, with me. No speeches. Just finish it. Her voice was surgical, cold, clean, with just a flicker of emotion beneath it. Not fear, not rage, purpose. In one of the ruined avenues, a young Coronian girl with cracked hooves and soot on her cheeks stared at Shaw as she passed. Her tiny hands trembled as she reached out, not in fear, but hope. Who are you?" she stammered. Shaw didn't stop, just turned her helmet slightly, voice muffled through static. "Earth. We came late, but we don't leave friends behind." Then she turned and blew through a Grell walker like it was made of rice paper. The Grell were still reeling. Their commanders screamed into comms trying to understand what was happening, but what they saw made no sense. The humans weren't fighting better. They were fighting like they had nothing to lose, like they had already been broken and rebuilt into something the universe couldn't comprehend. There was no single leader, no central hive mind. Every unit moved like a cell in a living beast. One fell, another adapted. They rotated, improvised, flanked, counterflanked. They didn't ask permission. They made decisions with instinct carved by fire. And worst of all, they didn't pause. Where Grell soldiers hesitated to confirm orders, humans acted. They jumped into collapsing buildings. They sprinted toward plasma blasts. They used their dying breaths to finish the fight. At the city's central monument, once a place of peace, now a crater of fire, Corporal Tay Navarro was pinned again. His side had reopened, blood soaking his utility belt, leaking into the dust. A Grell sniper team had him boxed. He had no cover, no backup, no ammo. His AI hissed, "Target lock impossible. Recommend retreat," he snarled. "I don't retreat. I redecorate." He ripped a shard of stone from the statue behind him, hurled it with all his strength, and broke the sniper's scope. That half-second window was all he needed. He lunged forward, grabbed a discarded Grell blade, and threw himself into the fight. No form, no training, just teeth and grit and the memory of home. He walked away limping, covered in green blood, muttering under his breath, "This is what dying feels like. Kinda boring." By now, Charon 9's sky was filled with the distant shimmer of Earth's supply pods. They came without elegance, tumbling, screaming, breaking through orbit like fists from God. Inside were more than just soldiers. There were combat medics, field engineers, drone pilots, even off-world civilians who had signed up because someone needed help. They didn't come for medals. They came because Earth remembered what abandonment felt like. In a shattered clinic, Aisha Rami, barely 22, fresh out of Earth's paramedic corps, stitched up a Coronian boy whose lungs were burnt from Grell gas. Her hands trembled. Her uniform was soaked in blood, human and alien. She hadn't slept in 2 days. But when the boy opened his eyes and looked at her, he didn't flinch. He whispered, "You're not like the Grell." She smiled softly, exhaustion weighing her down like gravity. "Neither are you." On the rooftop above her, Lieutenant Griggs, chewing a stim gum and humming an old Earth ballad, watched the horizon. He tapped his comm link and called to Shaw. "Colonel, got movement from the east. Looks big. Could be a siege." Shaw's voice came back through static. "Then we make it loud." Griggs grinned. "I was hoping you'd say that." He looked down at the demolitions pack beside him. Time to make some fireworks. And up in orbit, aboard the Grell flagship Dominance, Commander Vrax gripped the edges of his console with such force the alloy bent beneath his talons. He had seen insurgencies. He had faced rebellions. But this wasn't resistance. This was a reckoning. "These Terrans," he growled, "they fight without order, without honor." Carrick, his second, watched the battlefield with wide, unblinking eyes. "They don't fight like an empire," he whispered. "They fight like a species that knows extinction and spits in its face." Vrax hissed, activating his tactical grid. cut off their leaders, decapitate the resistance. But that was the mistake everyone made with humans. There was no single head to cut, no throne, no hive, just thousands of free-thinking, individually trained killers, each one carrying a world's worth of rage behind a rifle. Breaking the Grell order. The streets of Terran 9 weren't a battlefield anymore. They were a feeding ground, and the humans were sharks in blood-filled water. Where the Grell marched in formation, rows of augmented infantry, armored walkers in rigid grid lines. The humans were chaos incarnate. They attacked from alleys, sewers, rooftops, under debris, even through collapsed tunnels they dug by hand. They didn't care for symmetry. They cared about results, and it was working. The Grell's tactical superiority was built on predictability. They had studied structured warfare for generations, plans within protocols, formations within formations. But Earth's warriors had no use for doctrine. They turned desperation into strategy and rage into rhythm. At dawn, the humans hit a forward base from 4 sides simultaneously, not with elite units. With a flamethrower team, a drone piloting mechanic, and 3 former Martian prison soldiers armed with makeshift explosives. The Grell commander there never got a chance to report. Across the city, a Grell elite squad set up an ambush, cloaked and crouched in perfect position. Their first mistake, assuming humans would enter the kill zone on foot. Their second mistake, underestimating how insane humans could be. A stolen Grell bike rigged with a high-explosive warhead shot into the center of the trap at 160 kilometers per hour. No rider, just a remote detonation rig and a smiley face painted on the front. The resulting explosion flattened 3 blocks. When the dust settled, a voice crackled through the Grell's scrambled comms. Boo! On the ground, Colonel Shaw coordinated the carnage with calm precision. Griggs, hit the southern flank. Navarro, reinforce the medics and prep fallback point Theta. I want fallback contingencies, not retreat plans. Griggs, half his face blackened with soot, teeth glowing from some stim gum, nodded. Copy that, ma'am. Let's make him choke. Navarro, despite his bleeding leg and the cracked ribs, smirked, already drawing smiley faces on their ammo crates. Shaw didn't smile. She didn't need to, because behind her, Earth's war machine moved like a storm with purpose. Meanwhile, in orbit, Vrax watched the feeds die one by one. Not because they were jammed, because the operators were dead. Where is their weakness? He snarled. Carrick stared at the screen, pale. They have one, just not the kind we can exploit. Explain? Carrick swallowed. They fight like this is all they have, but they don't care if they die. That's not a weakness we're trained for. Vrax's claws dragged deep into the command table. This is not a war. This is slaughter. And then the reports came in, one after another. Supply depot, gone. Command post, overrun. Sniper roost, taken by a girl in a hoodie with a slingshot and a stolen Grell plasma pistol. Earth wasn't fighting fair. They were fighting to win. On the city's west wall, a group of Grell heavy units braced behind barricades. They had thermal shields, rotary plasma cannons, overlapping fields of fire. It was a death trap for any normal army. Too bad for them, humans weren't normal. The first breach wasn't from the front. It was from beneath. Earth's combat engineers, ex-miners from Europa, had dug through sewers and foundations. When they burst through, it wasn't subtle. One held up a crate of grenades and shouted, "Delivery from Earth!" The explosion that followed took out 3 bunkers. The rest fell to close quarters, knives, hammers, and bare fists. The surviving Grell commanders screamed for reinforcements. There were none. In the shattered government square, Colonel Shaw stood above a broken Grell statue, the symbol of conquest. Now a pedestal for Earth's flag, stitched together from scavenged cloth, with the old Terra insignia burned into the center. A hand clenched around a burning star. She raised her rifle and spoke into the open comms. Terran 9 is not a battlefield. It's a promise. This is what happens when you mistake silence for surrender. But not far away, the sky darkened again. Not with clouds. With something worse. Something vast. Something ancient. Commander Vrax stood frozen as 4 new blips appeared on the edge of his sensor grid. Massive, pulsing with red light, etched in runes older than the Grell language. His eyes widened. "No!" Carrick turned slowly. "What is it?" Vrax's voice was barely a whisper. "The Warbringers." And in that moment, every human on Terran 9 looked up. They saw the atmosphere ripple. They saw the world prepare to change. And Colonel Shaw narrowed her eyes. "They brought the big guns." Beside her, Roar, scarred, battered, calm as death, grinned. "Good. It wasn't fair before." The true enemy, Terran Ascendancy. The Warbringers arrived like mountains with engines. 4 of them, each the size of a small moon, drifted from deep space with the grace of silent executioners. They didn't send warnings. They didn't hail. They simply locked on and began to fire. 2 Earth destroyers were torn apart in the first 10 seconds. The UNS Nightfall, an aging dreadnought built during Earth's last planetary war, held the line. Alone, bruised, outgunned, but furious. Her captain didn't flinch. "Fire everything. Make them earn the silence." And she did. Missiles, beams, swarms of guided drones, long-range torpedoes filled with quantum glass. The Nightfall lit the sky in defiance and gave the planet below enough time. Because from her belly, hundreds of drop pods escaped, screaming toward Terran 9's surface like meteorites of fury. Shaw saw them. She recognized the shape, the burn pattern, reinforcements. Earth wasn't done, but something was wrong. The Warbringers weren't following up. They were holding back. In the dead hours before sunrise, Terran 9 was quiet, but not peaceful. The smoke hung thick in the air. The Grell had retreated into the inner city, fortified their last government spires, ringed themselves with auto turrets and neurotoxin mines. Vrax thought he had the high ground. He hadn't realized Earth didn't need high ground. It made it. At the edge of the ruined capital, a drop pod slammed into the ground with enough force to shatter steel. From the crater climbed a figure, tall, wide-shouldered, armor so black it seemed to drain light. Major Elias Roar. He was Earth's final option, the one they sent when all diplomacy failed and war itself cried mercy. Colonel Shaw met him in the shell of an old temple. "Didn't expect to see you," she said, brushing dust off her visor. Roar cracked his neck, eyes scanning the chaos. "Didn't want to come back. Earth politics is cleaner than this mess." Shaw gave a half smile. "We've got triple defense lines, war walkers, turrets, mines." Roar chuckled. "Sounds like my kind of party." Together they planned the final push, taking the stronghold, killing Vrax, ending the Grell reign once and for all. But fate had another twist, because just as the humans began their final charge, space trembled. A ship unlike any other broke through the veil. It didn't shimmer, it didn't glow. It simply appeared, an obsidian dagger larger than the Requiem, darker than deep space itself, and from it, a signal, encrypted, pre-Earth, older than any known human colony. Admiral Vex, watching from orbit, whispered into open comms, "It's Terran." The bridge went silent. Terran, a name from legend, a ghost race. The first explorers, the original diaspora from Earth's cradle, thought lost to the void 5 centuries ago. But now, they were back, and they weren't alone. From the Terran ship dropped a single object, not a missile, not a pod, a seed. It struck the surface like thunder, and where it landed, the world changed. Vines of black metal spread like veins through the soil. Dead Grell corpses twitched, then stood, not as zombies, as something new, rewritten, restructured, hybrid, human Grell hybrids, bones reshaped, skin hardened, eyes glowing a white blue. Not living, not dead, not natural, something engineered. Shaw and Roar stared in horror. "They're not just sending reinforcements," Roar muttered. "They're rewriting the battlefield." Within the inner stronghold, the humans breached the first 2 rings of defense. But before the final push, Shaw's comms lit up with a coded alert. Dr. Elia Vaughn, Earth's top war engineer, had gone silent for 10 minutes after leading a deep dive into the Grell fortress. Now her voice crackled back. "Colonel, you need to see this. Now!" They met in the core chamber. It wasn't made of stone or alloy. It was alive. The walls pulsed, the floor breathed, and in the center, a pod suspended in blue gel. Inside it floated something. Something that used to be Grell and used to be human. A hybrid, part flesh, part machine, part memory. Dr. Vaughn spoke in a whisper. They've been experimenting, not just on the Grell. On us, Roar's eyes narrowed. This isn't a lab. No, Vaughn said. It's a womb. The figure's eyes opened inside the pod. Too human, too wrong. Shaw raised her rifle. Not today. She fired, but the pod vanished, and a voice echoed from the walls. You came too late. This was never the war. This was the seeding. Above ground, the seed's black tendrils grew faster. Grell corpses everywhere began to shift, and in orbit, 5 more Terran ships decloaked. Admiral Vex choked on her breath. They're preparing full-scale overwrite. Shaw turned to Roar. They're not here to help us. Roar nodded grimly. They're here to replace us. The final stand, resistance without hope. The seed pulsed like a second heart beneath Karen 9. Its black tendrils split through concrete, wrapped around Grell corpses, and dragged them upright. They did not groan. They did not scream. They simply obeyed. Reanimated not by necromancy, but by genetic command. Each one became a new creature, human muscle bound to Grell bone, nerves replaced by synthetic wires. They moved like soldiers, but they didn't think. They executed, and they were many. On the surface, Earth's forces regrouped, not to retreat, to end it. Colonel Shaw stood on the rubble of a Grell tank, eyes scanning the horizon. Beside her, Major Roar loaded a fresh mag into his heavy repeater, expression grim. They're coming in waves, he muttered. Too perfect, no hesitation. Shaw didn't answer at first. Then she said, That's their weakness. What? She turned to him, eyes sharp. They're not afraid. They don't love. They don't disobey. She raised her rifle. That's why they'll lose. Across the city, Earth's warriors mobilized. Engineers with hammers and rifles. Pilots with half-broken ships crashing into spires. Medics using pistols with one hand and treating wounds with the other. Drones humming with EMP payloads, cutting through the hybrid tide like lightning. No orders were shouted, no speeches made. Everyone already knew. This wasn't a battle anymore. It was a line drawn in blood. Inside the fortress, Shaw led the charge. Through fire, through corpses, through tunnels that breathed like lungs. Each step was a war of its own. They reached the heart, a spire glowing with pulses of blue and red. The beacon, built not just to call reinforcements, built to overwrite evolution. Inside it screamed, not in sound, but in thought. It spoke to Shaw's mind, pulling on memory. It showed her Earth burning. It showed her squad dying. It showed her younger sister, dead for 20 years, whispering, You don't have to die here. Join us. Be the next step. Her hand trembled over the detonator on her chest. But then, a voice cut through the static. Shaw, it's me. Roar, alive, bleeding, defiant. Don't do it, he growled. We can still kill this thing, together. She laughed, short, bitter, broken, and lifted her rifle. Yeah, she whispered. You came back. The beacon screeched. The hybrid surged. And then it appeared. The hybrid, 9 feet tall, skin like steel, human eyes in a Grell skull, born of Earth and corrupted by the Terran's vision. It smiled. You are obsolete. Shaw didn't flinch. We're not obsolete. We're the parts you left behind because you couldn't control them. It lunged. She met it head on. Their fight was brutal, dirty, real. She stabbed. It roared. She was thrown across the chamber, shoulder dislocated, ribs cracking. Still she rose. Still she fought. When the hybrid charged again, Roar arrived, tackling it into a wall with a sonic grenade. They grappled, clawing, tearing, bleeding. And in the blur of violence, Roar tossed her the detonator. She caught it, looked into the hybrid's stolen eyes. This is Earth's answer. She triggered the charge. The world exploded. Light swallowed shadow. Silence followed violence. When the smoke cleared, the spire was gone. The walls had collapsed, and Shaw lay in the dust, alive, barely. Roar crawled from under a broken support beam, bloodied and coughing. "You owe me drinks," he rasped. Shaw laughed, dry and pained. "Only if we get off this rock." But the battle wasn't over. From orbit, Admiral Vex shouted through comms, "Incoming vessel, not Grell, not Terran." "What is it?" Shaw asked. Vex's voice trembled. "Terran signal, pre-Exodus. It's older than us." Silence, then two words. "It's Terran." The ground rumbled. A sleek, obsidian ship landed near the city ruins. From it stepped a humanoid figure, too smooth, too perfect, too still. It spoke in flawless Earth standard. "You've interfered with controlled restoration. You will be corrected." Shaw raised her rifle. "We don't evolve through control. We evolve through resistance." She pulled the trigger, and the next war began. One humanity, two paths. The shot didn't kill Helix, but it triggered everything. The Terran hybrids surged forward like a tide of silence and metal. Above, the obsidian ships began charging weapons, energy pulses so bright they bent the sky. And Earth? Earth didn't flinch. Admiral Vex gave the order. "Deploy Black Rain," a weapon Earth had sworn never to use again. Banned after the Pluto Accords, a city-sized kinetic rod dropped from orbit at terminal velocity, a god's fist. Below, Shaw and Roar stood side by side on the ruins of a city that had already died twice. All around them, soldiers, engineers, medics, refugees, held the line not with precision, but with heart. Not with perfection, but with pain. Shaw looked up at the falling star. She whispered, "This is for the ones who had no voice." The impact was world-ending. The seeds shattered. The hybrids froze, then fell. The Terran ships flickered, systems failing, unprepared for the madness Earth had unleashed. They fled, not defeated, but warned. When the dust settled, the capital of Karen 9 was a crater of silence and hope. The Grell were broken. The Terrans were gone. But something far more important remained. The humans were still there. Roar sat on the edge of a shattered wall, one arm in a sling, the other clutching a water canister. Shaw stood beside him, battered, bloodied, but breathing. He looked at her. "We won?" She shook her head. "We survived." A soft wind blew through the ashes. Children played in the wreckage. A Coronian girl handed a Terran soldier a piece of fruit. No words, just trust. From orbit, the Requiem broadcast a final message across the stars. To any who would overwrite freedom with control, to any who would program humanity out of existence, we are still here, and we remember. And somewhere far beyond the edge of known space, the Terran Ascendancy watched, observed, calculated. But even they, with all their algorithms and perfect logic, failed to model one truth. You don't fix humanity, you survive it. Guru.